Hey, what's up guys? Bob here. Welcome to my Christmas gift for my YouTube channel being recorded in, it's July. We'll ignore that little detail. I figured since a good amount of my subscribers actually have varying levels of expertise in Yu-Gi-Oh! Some are brand new to the game, some probably don't even know the game, some definitely are a little bit more into it than others. I can definitely see the broad spectrum even in my own Discord. I figured this would probably be a good opportunity to go ahead and give you guys something a little more substantive to chew on instead of your traditional deck profile guide. I figured, let's go ahead and actually give you guys a proper deck construction guide. This is, first of all, yes, obviously this is going to be extremely wide, broad. This isn't going to be focusing on specific decks. This is how, these are guidelines for how to help you make a deck a certain way, or to make your deck better, or to it's just a blueprint of how to make a deck in general. So obviously with that, we're gonna have to start basic. I mean, super basic. So I hope you can bear with me if you're a more experienced player, just to get everyone caught up, but you might learn some things along the way yourself. Who the hell knows? So obviously, by the way, yes, my notes are off to the side here, so I'm gonna be looking over there quite a bit. So first of all, there are 3 things you need to keep in mind when you're making a deck. At least I like to think of it as, obviously you're going to get different ideas from different better players. Obviously, I'm not an amazing player. I've gotten up to gold 3 in Master Duel so far. I've done okay, but obviously I'm not amazingly proficient. I think I'm better in Edison format, 2014 format than modern format, but I may as well just show Master Duel because I have a good amount of decks made anyway, and they can kind of serve as a good illustration guide. So there are 3 ideas I want you to keep in mind. 3 main steps, I guess, for when you're making a deck. 1 is, what are you trying to do? We'll cover that more as we get to it. 2 is ratios, and 3 is tech options. And yes, every single one of these steps are important for when we go forward. So before we even progress from there, I want you to know, we're going to refresh on some basic things about Yu-Gi-Oh! These are, of course, fairly obvious if you are experienced, but these are very important to keep in the back of your mind if you are getting into deck building, obviously. Couple rules, reminders, more or less. If you go first, you are unable to attack. Keep that in mind, obviously. Turn 1, if you opt to go first, if you do so, you're not going to be able to attack your opponent, but there are some things you want to keep in mind about that. If you go second, you can attack the same turn, but you have to deal with what your opponent has on the board. This goes for literally every single format on the face of the earth. Now, oh yeah, I should probably mention that. These rules don't just apply to modern day 2022 format. These go way back. Like these ideas that I'm going to be parsing to you guys. Like the names may change, but the ideas pretty much stay the same. So these 2 rules, the going first and going second rule, mean that different types of decks have to play different ways. As in, more defensive boards are going to want to go first, and if you're going second, certain cards will benefit you more, like hand traps or from hand removal. Obviously, we'll elaborate more on these ideas later, but just keep in mind, if you go first, you don't have to worry about anything on your opponent's side of the field. If you go second, you can attack the same turn and try to OTK someone, but you gotta worry about your opponent's got set. If you go with modern format, this could be shit like skill drain, or back row, or like a board covered in negates, like Dragon Link, for example. If you go like older formats, this might be something like having to go through a mirror force if you think one's on the field, skill drain again because the card's fucking old, so on and so forth. But if you go first, you can set up, but you have to be worried about things your opponent's gonna be playing, like hand traps, like Effect Veiler for older formats, Ash Blossom for newer formats, and so on and so forth. Now let's cover exactly what are you trying to do with your deck. So my decks I currently have in the game, I have a couple already made. Obviously I'm not going to get too in-depth about every single one of them, but essentially each of these decks want to do something different. Like Red Dragon Archie wants to do something way different what my 6 Samurai deck wants to do. We'll cover these. Obviously these are just examples. You don't take this like as a hard and fast rule, but you want to identify what exactly you're trying to do. This isn't something you have to ask second. This could be something you want to ask first. Like, what do you want to do? Do you want to make a defensive style kind of gameplay? Do you want to make something a little more offensive based? Now, you can ask yourself if it's meta later. Like, when you're going through archetypes, you can pick something, whatever. It's just get into it. That's really like the big thing. Just get in the door first. Now, obviously, this idea could be daunting to new players, but it centers around what you want your end game to be, aka your win condition. It's a very important term that I'm certain you've probably heard before at least once. Yeah, different decks have different win conditions and different ways of getting there. For example, just some examples I have jotted down in my notes. Cyber Dragons want to obliterate with huge attack points. I guess Mech Lords do these days as well. Blue Eyes can do either that or run an extra deck-based control style thanks to like alternative Ultimate Dragon. Not in this game, by the way. Weird. Trick Stars want to burn your opponent. Just so on and so forth. Obviously, these aren't like your only options. Being willing to experiment and just general exposure of yourself to the game will definitely help you broaden your horizons and help you be able to pick out what you want to be able to do. Like, if certain decks seem cool and fun, go for it. Why the hell not? Thanks to the prevalence of, you know, the internet, contrary to what everyone is going to say about you have to drop $2,000 onto a deck. You don't have to. If you want to just screw around with the simulator and just try it out in game, you totally can. Then you can worry about price tags later. Now, obviously, with over 14,000 cards in this game, this isn't something that a beginner can do out the gate. Holy hell, even me. I got back into the game in like 2016, 2015. And yeah, I still barely know like a fraction of the cards in this game and a lot of their interactions. The best way you can get into the game easily, and people are going to cringe at this, it's just to copy someone's deck and go nuts. Like, just copy a deck list or a profile. People call this net decking, and some will jokingly ridicule you for it, or some will ironically ridicule for it. Fuck those guys. Literally, whatever it takes for you to get back in the game, do not feel bad about it whatsoever. Now, here's where things get a little bit interesting. So if we look over some of my decks I have already made, you're going to notice that, like, okay, so obviously we got the monster cards, spell cards, and trap cards. You're going to notice a little bit of overlap with the spell cards as well as the monster cards as well. For example, with Thunder Dragons here, 3 Maxi, 3 Ash Blossom, and 1 Infinite Permanence. We also got some other older staple cards, Gold Sark, Instant Fusion. These aren't like as... Well, those last two aren't as like omnipresent these days as they were in like 2016. But you're going to see some overlap. Like, oh, there's the Monster Reborn. We got Called by the Grave. And look, Ash Blossom's back. Interesting. And then we go over to my deck over here. I think there's a monster. There is a Monster Reborn, yeah. So your general exposure to the game will allow you to begin to identify overlapping ideas, like Monster Reborn, Fool's Burial, older decks that have like Upstart Goblin. I think there's also Pop Extravagance. Yeah, so these are sometimes called good Yu-Gi-Oh cards. So yeah, general exposure will be your best bet in order to just quickly get off the ground. I do have some other decks around here. Oh yeah, got my Galaxy Eyes deck from when I first got into this game. Raigeki Monster Reborn, there it is again. Called by the Grave. Ignore the Bottomless Trap Hole, this is filler because I didn't have anything else to work with at the start of the game. If I look at my Blue Eyes control deck under construction over here. Okay, cool. You will see that there, Monster Reborn again, Raigeki. Very staple, very common staple cards. You will definitely begin to notice that. As you begin to ease your way back into the game, these are ideas that will become more and more frequent. Now, the next bit, ratios. This is really where you're going to become good at the game. And that might sound a little hyperbolic, but in truth, ratios are really what makes your decks tick. Like, I mean that completely and utterly. Ratios are really what will dictate not only how your deck handles, but how frequently it'll be able to get to what it wants to do. I guess this brings me back to one point I actually completely forgot to mention earlier. The less cards you have in your deck, the easier it'll be to draw the cards you want to get access to. Just keep that in mind going forward. So obviously having just one inclusion of a card in like a 40 to 60 card deck makes the odds of drawing into the card pretty small. Like 1 in 40, 1 in 60. Yeah, that's probably not going to happen on your opening draw, so that's unfortunate. So that's why adding more copies of a select card will raise your odds of getting into it. If I were to go over to my Samurai Jack deck over here, yes, I really called my 6 Samurai deck Samurai Jack. You'll see I have a couple different cards, like 6 Sam Kazuki. This is a card I really want to draw on my opening turn. I have 3 of Kuzan. Kizan, this, you know why this is a thing if you know this metagame whatsoever. Shian Smokestick goes at 3. You can see why. It's a searcher. We'll cover more about that later. gold bamboo swords at 3. Now, there are a couple ways to aid in the deck thinning process. There are different kind of like fan-generated terms for different like types of cards. One of the more prolific is searchers. I think the older term is recruiter. I think it's based off of Gravekeeper's recruiter. I could be wrong about that though. So these are things like terraforming, emergency call, drawing cards like, well, these isn't really a searcher, but drawing cards like Upstart or Trade-In, deck milling like Light Swords, etc. Obviously, I can show you guys these. Yeah, it's like Xian Smoke Signal, add 1 level 3 or lower 6 stand monster from your deck to your hand. And it just so happens, a lot of these cards are level 3 or lower. Yep, 3, 3. This one's a 4. That's a 4. This is getting bigger. This is a level 1. So on and so forth. So basically, with these 3 searchers in my deck, if 3 out of the 40 of them are this, if I draw any of them, which is close to a 10% chance, I'm going to have an immediate, like, quote unquote, I guess, Joker, ace card or whatever, in order to just immediately get one search, as in dig through my deck in order to pull it up. So it immediately helps bypass the issue of drawing hard into it. Yeah, and obviously if you go back and look at like Light Swords, send top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. This is a term called milling. I'm not exactly sure where exactly this term comes from. It might be from Magic the Gathering for all I know off the top of my head, but basically, yeah, this is another form of deck thinning. This is the, by the way, deck thinning is the general blanket term used for trying to empty out your deck as much as possible in order to find your ace cards. For example, one older form of tech that people used to love is, believe it or not, this card, Tune Table of Contents. Why is this such an old staple? Because add 1/2 card from your deck to your hand, not once per turn. And it just happens this tune portion of the name is also here. So what people used to do back in the day was run literally 3 copies of Tune Table of the Contents in order to instantly take their deck from 40 cards down to 37. I think around 2013 is when people started running 3 Upstart Goblin, where essentially giving your opponent like 3,000 extra life points to let you deck in from 40 to 37 also. And the odds of drawing one specific card you need from a 37 card deck versus a 40 card deck, it's a little more notable than you might think. Now, one rule of thumb, and this might be a little bit more controversial, I see more advanced players use this idea. Basically, it's that if a card is in your deck, it's not really a resource. So that might sound incredibly weird, but basically the idea here is if I were to go over to my Thunder Dragons, for example, monster cards in different areas actually can't, depending on where they are actually quote-unquote live in a sort of speak. So basically, if a lot of cards end up in your graveyard, they are still accessible in more modern formats. Way back in the day when monsters being in a graveyard were more difficult to actually pull out of the graveyard, this had a little more weight to them actually going there. Modern formats though, like anything 2010 upwards, basically the graveyard is just another resource. So if something ends up there, it's really not a big deal. It's just like some decks even just kind of treat the graveyard as a second hand, pretty much. If something is in your deck, it's usually not immediately within your grasp to utilize unless you use a searcher card for it. That's why people say that if it's in your deck, it's not a resource. In fact, that's actually one of the big reasons why Thunder Dragons have this for their fusion card. You can fusion summon a monster, a Thunder Dragon one, for example, by spinning something from either the field, the graveyard, or the banished pile back into your deck. That essentially makes it so that way it's kind of buried back in your deck as a way to like kind of make it a little more difficult to access. So that way it's not just circling around in perpetual motion all over again. And of course there are a ton of other decks like zombies, for example, that just love having things in the graveyard. For example, this card I barely remember the ability of offhand, Mizuki. You can banish this card from your graveyard and target one zombie monster in your graveyard, special summon that target. You got stuff like Plague Sweater Zombie from back in the day. Oh, it's a normal monster now. That's pretty cool. This card's in your graveyard. You can place a card from your hand on top of the deck, and you can just special summon it for free. Basically, yeah, some decks really do just treat the graveyard as like a second hand. One thing I do want to mention about that is if a monster is in a graveyard, you can just look at it. Like, you don't have to search for it whatsoever. You can just see it, like right there. Like, literally, if you have something that targets it, you can just see it. You don't have to like go playing poker to go try to find it out of your deck. You can just get it immediately. To give you perspective on how important the graveyard can be and like how essentially like non-punishing the graveyard is versus something being banished face down. Yeah, here it is. Banish 10 cards from the top of your deck face down, draw 2 cards. The reason for this is important is because banished face down means you basically can't get access to it. It is effectively out of the game. I think there's like maybe very, very few ways to get access to them again, which is why Pot of Desires is pretty good, because it's like, yeah, that is one drawback for being able to draw 2. Now, something also that's really cool, I've kind of talked about this a little bit with zombies, but some archetypes even kind of bring their own draw power. If you were to look at like Galaxy Eyes or Blue Eyes, for example, there is one common card in between them called Trade-In. This card, one level 8 monster, draw 2 cards. Now, obviously, you'll say Trade-In isn't strictly speaking a Blue Eyes monster. Well, you look at this, and it's basically almost a Blue Eyes functionally, but also it helps accelerate level 8 decks so much. Blue Eyes is definitely the most prolific. Galaxy Eyes is one of the more prolific ones of those decks. Now, I will say one thing. Normally you do want to run 40 card decks, generally speaking, because it does give you on average the higher access to the draw power, or sorry, easier ways of drawing into cards that you would immediately want in your hand. But that being said, if your deck, I think this is more so like the reason, but if your deck has like good drawing power, you can go upwards like a 41, 43, something like that. For example, this Blue Eyes deck I have over here, wherever it is, there it is. Now, obviously, it's not done, but this is a 42 card deck. The reason being is because it is a fusion deck. There's many ways to search out monsters, like these guys, for example. These really help with the searching. So, if your deck can facilitate better searching prowess, then you can afford to run more than 40 cards. Just so that way you can squeeze in the extra attack choices, you know, so on and so forth. If your deck wants to run more than 40 cards, or if you can't slim it down to 40 without substantially losing something important, you can run more. There are full 60 card decks that do exist, like Light Sworns or decks using that grass looks greener, if you need to know what that card looks like. If you have more cards in your deck than your opponent does, send cards from the top of your deck to the graveyard so you have the same number of cards in the deck as your opponent. Milling 20 in order to immediately slim down to this. Yeah, that's why some people do that, unironically. Alright, hope so far what I've done has actually painted a decent picture about how to generally go about constructing decks. Now, the last part, and this might be the most... The ideas again so far are definitely going to help you get off the ground and make a functioning deck. Now this is where you're going to get to the making your deck really good, and this is tech options. Now tech options are basically the primary thing you'll be adjusting to win games outside of just adjusting ratios. One thing I forgot to mention about ratios is that it's something that you'll basically always be doing with your deck. You'll never truly be done making your deck. Like, you'll make something and you'll test it out, and maybe like you didn't draw into your key cards enough times, so you go back and make adjustments, and then you just continue making fine tweaks. Now, obviously, if you net deck something, then it's probably going to be good off the bat, but you can always feel free to make adjustments as you see fit for the decks that you are commonly coming across. Now, back to tech options. Depending on the format, you'll run additional support cards to counter certain decks. An example being Mask and Restrict to shut down Monarchs, Consecrated Light for Black Wings, or Level Limit Area B to harass bigger star decks like Blue Eyes. These are obviously much older examples. Modern formats are not really so much running... I mean, if you're running tournament play, you are running side decks that are straight up running like anti-meta choices. Like, I think people are probably running stuff for Sword Soul, and or just more hand traps. I can't really say for sure immediately, but I'm pretty sure that they would be doing that, given the prevalence of some decks like Dragon Link, Sword Soul, Adamancipator, Eldritch, shit like that. So this is generally like the more primary usage of side decks. Now, obviously, I can't show this because Master Duel has no side deck, because it's a best of one format, usually for online ranked, so oopsie. The reason for you're gonna have a side deck is that way you can actually switch out main deck cards for stuff that you can use to counter other certain cards that you're gonna be up against. The side decks are very important in competitive play. If you look at older formats, additional side deck options can be things that would kickstart your plays better, like Cyber Dragons, for example. Just immediately shit out a level 5 special summon on turn 1. That was pretty good for many years. Even still today is, I would say that's kind of good going turn 2 especially. Now, above all else, you're going to want to be willing to lose a few times. You're going to want to gather information how you lost and use the information to learn matchups and adjust your deck accordingly. It's always a learning process. You are never done making your deck. So in summary, copy other people's deck profiles, go for it. It's fine. It really is fine. Actually, Master Duel does it especially well because if you were to go ahead and make one new and you can copy from a public deck, you can just do that. It's great. Like if you see some stuff and you just want to like type in, oh wow, no, Blue Eyes. What good decks are there for Blue Eyes decks? Maybe you can tweak into your own needs, and always experiment with side deck options for common decks you'll duel against. Obviously. The things you come across the most, you're gonna want to obviously prepare for them. Clearly, again, modern format. I think there's less specific decks you're gonna be arming yourself against, and more so like having things on the side, like hand traps, for example. One thing I can tell you is that this deck, whereas it does run, I think 1 or 2, yeah, it runs 3 Ash Blossom. My 6 Samurai deck does not run hand traps or even really any outs. Yeah, it's kind of more focused on just, you know, creating these. Now, I will show you some things as to what exactly would you be going for. So, like, I'll show you some some replays I've had in this game, and hopefully it can give you an idea for what you would look for and shit like this. Okay, so this is one particular replay I have that I do find to be very interesting. This is something I actually had on stream a little while ago, and it was hilarious enough I decided to actually go ahead and run it. So, I'm gonna go ahead and... This is basically my 6 Samurai deck. The idea is to basically shit out your extra deck as quickly as possible. Kizaru did get impermed, but didn't even slow me down one bit. I just didn't get the surge off the top. Go ahead and go into Isol, go ahead and search up into our Kazuki for a follow-up turn, because I can't special summon it right now. Summon Hatsume, that's the whole idea of the deck, and we got a summon draw power for dumping. Here comes Battle Shogun, go ahead and dump the gold sword. And now, just like that, we are live, because we have the 2 Kizons in hand. We can go ahead and start generating tokens. You can see exactly which is going. The thing about 6 Samurais is that they do not necessarily have to worry about playing around hand traps. It can kind of just go off. Go ahead and go straight into a Link for Appaloosa, and unfortunately that's where I tapped out, but it doesn't even really matter. Oh yeah, this was a Sword Soul player, right? So this is very hilarious because I decided to hold off and wait until some actually things were going to be going on. If I had Shien, I would have been able to negate those cards from the word go. And just like that, because they did not do anything to me turn 2. Oh yeah, we ran the Maxi challenge because... Don't even care. Appaloosa can just keep going. It doesn't even really matter. Just like that. Now with this card on the field, you might, if you're a member familiar, you might know where this is going. Number 86, Rongo. Rongo Bongo's on the field. I negated a Nibiru on the field, and just like that, 5 material Rongo, and they are completely locked out of playing the game. Like, they cannot normal or special summon monsters right now, and they will come to realize this. Very slowly. And there's a scoop. Rongo Bongo completely made them scoop, so... Yeah, just to give an example as to what kind of decks do this shit. It's pretty funny. Now, unfortunately, that first replay, my deck didn't quite go off as hard as it could have because I went to Appaloosa turn 1. Oop, nope, that's a different deck. Now we're going to go for a different deck. This is my Galaxy Eyes deck. I actually don't remember fully what this deck was doing off the top of my head, but I do remember we got a pretty good opening hand turn 1, and as a result, my deck managed to pop off pretty well. Got 2 level 8s on the field, and I'm pretty sure going to go... Yep, okay. Go into Hope Harbinger, and just like that, if they try to play a spell card, I'm going to eat it. So, yeah, was this the... Oh, nope. They play 1 spell card, I negated, and they just kind of noped the fuck out. Yeah. So those are 2 different decks, and what they can do differently. Basically, the 6 Samurai deck is meant to just spam out a whole ton of extra deck monsters. Galaxy Eyes is meant to kind of run more control variants and doing it quickly. Yeah, it's funny, also making people scoop. So yeah, hope you guys have enjoyed and learned a thing or two about deck construction. It's really not as complicated as you would think. It actually doesn't take that long to start like seeing the overlap of cards also. But yeah, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. And maybe next year I won't hold off until making a Christmas gift in July. Maybe. Who knows?